The summer heat shimmered off the asphalt as Staff Sergeant Richardson pulled his motorcycle into the small-town diner just off Route 66. After 15 years of service and 3 tours overseas, he was enjoying a cross-country ride before reporting to his new post in Colorado. The chrome of his bike gleamed in the late afternoon sun, matching the polished buttons on his dress uniform, which he wore with quiet pride. The parking lot was filled with motorcycles, their engines still ticking as they cooled in the heat. As Richardson removed his riding gloves, he noticed a group of leather-clad bikers watching him from their table through the diner's wide windows. Their stares lingered a bit too long, but he'd grown used to such looks over the years. Inside, the diner smelled of coffee and apple pie. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, greeted him with a warm smile. "Seat yourself anywhere, Han," she called out, juggling plates of burgers and fries. Richardson chose a booth near the window, his military training automatically positioning him with a clear view of both the entrance and his bike. He could hear the low murmurs from the bikers' corner, their conversations dropping to whispers as he passed. There were 7 of them, wearing leather vests covered in patches and insignias he didn't care to read too closely. Richardson focused on the menu instead, though years of experience had taught him to keep his other senses alert. The waitress approached his table, her name tag reading Betty. She pulled out her notepad with a practiced flourish. "What can I get you, soldier?" Her voice carried a gentle southern lilt that reminded him of home. "Coffee, black, and the special, ma'am," he replied with a polite smile. As Betty walked away, the bell above the door chimed. 2 more bikers entered, their boots heavy on the linoleum floor. The group in the corner grew louder, their laughter carrying an edge that made other diners shift uncomfortably in their seats. Richardson maintained his composure, methodically arranging his silverware while keeping track of movements in his peripheral vision. His phone buzzed, a message from his sister asking about his travel progress. As he typed a quick response, he heard chairs scraping against the floor. 3 of the bikers approached his table, their shadows falling across his phone screen. The largest one, sporting a graying beard and faded tattoos, planted his hands on the edge of Richardson's table. "Nice uniform," he drawled, his tone making it clear it wasn't a compliment. Before Richardson could respond, Betty appeared with his coffee, positioning herself partially between him and the bikers. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" Her voice was steel-wrapped in silk, the kind of authority that came from decades of managing difficult customers. "No problem," the bearded biker replied, but he didn't move. "Just having a friendly chat with the soldier boy here." His companions snickered, and Richardson noticed other patrons pretending to focus on their meals while watching the scene unfold from the corners of their eyes. Richardson took a slow sip of his coffee, his movements deliberate and calm. "I appreciate the welcome," he said evenly, meeting the biker's gaze. "But I'm just here for a meal, same as you." 15 years of military service had taught him that sometimes the best defense was steady composure. The tension in the diner thickened as 2 more bikers stood up from their table. However, before they could join their companions, the diner's door chimed again. A tall figure stepped inside, and the atmosphere shifted subtly. An older man in a weathered leather vest walked toward them, his presence commanding immediate attention. His vest bore patches indicating he was a veteran himself, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen his share of conflicts. "Think carefully about what you're doing here, boys," the newcomer's voice rumbled through the diner. He stopped a few feet from the group, his stance relaxed but purposeful. "That uniform he's wearing? I wore one just like it in '91. And I'm thinking some of you forgot what it stands for." The bearded biker's expression flickered, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face. Richardson remained silent, watching the dynamics shift as the veteran biker moved closer. The diner had gone completely quiet, save for the soft country music playing from an old jukebox in the corner. "We were just leaving," one of the other bikers muttered, tugging at his companion's sleeve. The bearded leader stood his ground for a moment longer, his internal struggle visible in the tightening of his jaw. Betty cleared her throat pointedly. "Your food's getting cold at your table, gentlemen. Best see to it." Her words, though polite, carried an unmistakable dismissal. The group slowly retreated to their corner, their earlier bravado deflated. The veteran biker turned to Richardson, a look of understanding passing between them. Without a word, he sat down at the counter, ordered a coffee, and began reading a newspaper as if nothing had happened. The regular rhythm of the diner gradually resumed, clinking plates, murmured conversations, and the steady hum of the air conditioning. As Richardson's meal arrived, he noticed the bikers paying their bill and filing out, their earlier hostility replaced by something that looked almost like shame. The bearded leader paused at the door, glanced back at Richardson, then ducked his head and left. Betty refilled Richardson's coffee cup, adding a slice of apple pie he hadn't ordered. "On the house, soldier," she said with a wink. Some folks need reminding that courage comes in many forms, both in standing up to trouble and knowing when to walk away from it. The veteran at the counter folded his newspaper and raised his coffee cup in a subtle salute. Outside, the sound of motorcycles faded into the distance. As the summer sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Richardson savored his pie, grateful for the reminder that even in moments of tension, humanity's better nature often finds a way to shine through. As the evening settled in, more customers filled the diner, unaware of the drama that had unfolded earlier. Richardson finished his meal, left a generous tip, and prepared to continue his journey. The veteran was gone by then, but his quiet intervention had left a lasting impression. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the most effective response to hatred isn't more hatred, but the steady presence of those who stand for something better. The incident at the diner weighed on Staff Sergeant Richardson's mind as he checked into the small roadside motel for the night. The neon vacancy sign buzzed softly in the growing darkness, casting alternating red and blue shadows across the parking lot. He'd chosen this place for its strategic location, halfway to his destination in Colorado, but now he wondered if he should push on to the next town. After securing his room, Richardson was surprised to see several familiar motorcycles pulling into the motel's parking lot. His muscles tensed instinctively, but these weren't the bikes from the diner. Instead, it was the veteran biker from earlier, accompanied by 4 others wearing similar vests with military service patches. The veteran, who introduced himself simply as Sarge, approached Richardson with an outstretched hand. "Hope you don't mind the company. These roads can get lonely at night." His weathered face crinkled with a genuine smile. "My crew and I are headed to a veterans rally in Denver. Figured we might as well keep an eye on a fellow serviceman." As they talked, Richardson learned that Sarge led a group of veteran bikers who dedicated themselves to supporting active-duty military personnel and their families. They shared stories in the motel's dimly lit parking lot, their voices carrying softly through the evening air. Each tale revealed a deeper understanding of service, sacrifice, and the bonds that transcend superficial differences. "What happened at the diner today," Sarge said, leaning against his bike, "it ain't right, but it ain't uncommon either. Some folks carry their ignorance like a shield, afraid to see the world any other way." He paused, studying the stars appearing in the darkening sky. "But things are changing, slowly but surely." One of Sarge's companions, a former Navy medic, shared how their group had transformed the lives of several former troublemakers, including some who once belonged to discriminatory biker gangs. "Sometimes people just need to see a different path," he explained. "We've had guys who used to cause problems like those fellas at the diner. Now they ride with us, escorting military funerals and helping veteran families." As the night deepened, more stories emerged. Richardson learned about their community outreach programs, their work with troubled youth, and their efforts to bridge divides in small towns across America. The conversation was interrupted by the rumble of approaching motorcycles. It was the group from the diner. The tension in the air was palpable as the bikers pulled into the motel parking lot. This time, however, something was different. The bearded leader from earlier approached slowly, his body language less aggressive, more uncertain. Sarge stood quietly, his presence both watchful and welcoming. Took some thinking, the bearded biker began, his voice gruff but lacking its earlier hostility. My old man served in Vietnam. Didn't talk about it much, but he taught me better than how I acted today. He extended his hand to Richardson. Name's Ray. I owe you an apology. The simple gesture carried the weight of years of prejudice beginning to crack. Richardson accepted the handshake, recognizing the courage it took to acknowledge one's mistakes. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight with ourselves, he replied, echoing words his first sergeant had once shared. As the night wore on, an unlikely gathering formed in the motel's small courtyard. Ray and his group joined the veterans, sharing coffee from a thermos and stories that revealed more commonalities than differences. One of Ray's younger companions, it turned out, had a brother serving in the same unit where Richardson had once been stationed. The motel owner, an elderly man who'd been watching from his office, brought out folding chairs and a plate of his wife's homemade cookies. Been running this place 30 years, he said, settling into a chair. First time I've seen something like this. He gestured to the diverse group of bikers sharing stories and laughter under the stars. Richardson observed how Sarge skillfully guided the conversation, helping Ray's group see beyond their preconceptions. They discussed their shared love for the open road, their experiences in different parts of the country, and the challenges facing veterans in their communities. The hostile energy from the diner had transformed into something resembling understanding. As midnight approached, Ray's group prepared to leave. We're headed east, Ray said, adjusting his leather vest. But this ain't the last you'll see of us. Sarge here mentioned your veteran support programs. Maybe it's time we put our rides to better use. The transformation wasn't complete, years of ingrained prejudice don't disappear in a single night. But Richardson could see the seeds of change taking root. As Ray's bikes rumbled away into the darkness, Sarge placed a hand on Richardson's shoulder. That's how it starts, he said quietly. One conversation, one moment of honesty at a time. The night air had grown cool, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Richardson's phone buzzed with another message from his sister, checking on him. As he typed a reply, he smiled, thinking about how different this evening had turned out from what he'd expected. Before turning in, Richardson walked to the motel's small vending area for a bottle of water. The owner was there, restocking the machine. You know, the old man said, straightening up with a grunt, I've seen all kinds of people come through here over the years. But nights like this remind me that people can surprise you in the best ways possible. Richardson nodded, understanding that he'd witnessed something rare and valuable, the moment when barriers begin to break down, when people choose to see beyond their prejudices and recognize the humanity in others. As he walked back to his room, the stars bright overhead, he thought about how tomorrow's ride would feel different. The road ahead seemed to hold new possibilities, not just for him, but for all those whose paths had crossed in this unexpected way at a small motel off the highway. Dawn broke over the highway as Richardson prepared for another day on the road. The morning air was crisp, carrying the promise of a hot day ahead. As he loaded his saddlebags, he noticed Sarge and his crew already up, their bikes gleaming in the early morning light. The motel's small breakfast area buzzed with activity. The owner's wife had prepared a special breakfast for the bikers, homemade biscuits and gravy, with coffee strong enough to wake the dead. As they ate, Richardson couldn't help but reflect on how different this morning felt compared to yesterday's tension at the diner. Got word from Ray this morning, Sarge mentioned between bites. His group's heading to their clubhouse to talk about some changes. Seems last night left quite an impression. He smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. Sometimes all it takes is one moment to start seeing things differently. One of Sarge's companions, a retired Air Force mechanic, shared how their veteran biker group had started. Back in '95, we were just 3 guys with bikes and a dream of making things better," he explained, pouring more coffee. "Now we've got chapters in 12 states. People want to be part of something bigger than themselves." As they finished breakfast, the motel owner's wife pressed paper bags of sandwiches into their hands. "For the road," she insisted, her eyes twinkling. "Can't have our servicemen riding hungry." The simple gesture of kindness touched Richardson deeply. The group headed out together, their bikes forming a loose formation on the highway. The morning sun cast long shadows ahead of them as they rode through small towns and past endless fields. At each stop, Richardson noticed how Sarge's crew interacted with locals, always respectful, always ready with a kind word or helping hand. At a gas station in a tiny town, they encountered a young soldier trying to get home on leave. His car had broken down, and the local mechanic couldn't look at it until Monday. Without hesitation, Sarge's group sprang into action. The Air Force mechanic diagnosed the problem, while others made calls to arrange temporary transportation for the stranded soldier. "This is what we do," Sarge explained as they worked. "Every uniform we help is a reminder of why we started this journey." Richardson watched as the young soldier's anxiety transformed into relief and gratitude. The local community pitched in too, the gas station owner offering his phone, a passing trucker contributing tools. By mid-morning, the heat had begun to build. They stopped at a scenic overlook, the landscape stretching endlessly before them. A group of tourists watched curiously as the bikers gathered, probably surprised to see such a diverse group riding together. One of Sarge's riders, a quiet man who'd served in Desert Storm, shared a story about his own transformation. "Used to be full of anger after coming back," he admitted. "Found peace on these roads, riding with people who understood. Now we try to share that peace with others." Their phones buzzed simultaneously, a message from Ray. He'd spoken with his club, and they wanted to learn more about the veteran support programs. "See?" Sarge grinned. "Change ripples out like waves in a pond. Never know how far it'll reach." As they continued their journey, they passed through a small town celebrating a local festival. American flags lined the main street, and people waved as the bikers rode past. A group of children watched in awe, their eyes wide at the sight of the motorcycles and riders. They stopped for lunch at a family-owned restaurant, where the owner turned out to be a veteran himself. As they ate, he shared his own stories of service and the challenges of returning to civilian life. The conversation turned to the importance of community and understanding. "You know what makes America beautiful?" the restaurant owner mused, refilling their drinks. "It's not just the land or the ideals, it's moments like this, when people from different walks of life come together and really see each other." In the early afternoon, they reached the point where their paths would diverge. Richardson needed to head northwest toward Colorado, while Sarge's group continued straight toward Denver. The farewell felt more like a "see you later" than a goodbye. Sarge pulled Richardson aside before they parted. "What happened yesterday at the diner, that's the old way of thinking," he said. "But what happened after, at the motel? That's the future we're riding toward. Every mile, every conversation, every hand extended in friendship instead of raised in anger, it all adds up." They exchanged contact information and promises to stay in touch. Sarge's group had connections near Richardson's new post in Colorado, fellow riders who could show him the best roads and introduce him to the local veteran community. As Richardson watched their bikes disappear into the distance, he thought about how a potentially ugly incident had transformed into something powerful and positive. His phone buzzed, another message from Ray, this time with a photo of his group meeting with local veterans, taking the first steps toward change. The afternoon sun was high as Richardson continued his journey alone, but he didn't feel lonely. The events of the past 24 hours had reminded him of an essential truth: beneath the surface differences that often divide people, there's a deeper humanity waiting to be recognized and embraced. A sign welcomed him to another small town, and he noticed a group of bikers outside a cafe. They nodded respectfully as he passed, and he returned the gesture. The road stretched ahead, full of possibilities, and Richardson rode on, carrying with him the hope that each mile brought America a little closer to being the nation it was meant to be, one where people judge each other not by appearance or prejudice, but by the content of their character and the kindness in their hearts. The afternoon heat had begun to wane as Richardson rolled into a bustling roadside truck stop. The massive parking lot was filled with big rigs, their drivers taking mandatory breaks from long hauls. After hours of riding, he welcomed the chance to stretch his legs and refuel both his bike and himself. Inside, the truck stop hummed with activity, a microcosm of America on the move. Drivers from all backgrounds mingled over coffee and hot meals, sharing road conditions and stories from their travels. Richardson found himself drawn to the welcoming atmosphere of the place. As he waited in line for coffee, he overheard a heated discussion between two truck drivers about a stranded family a few miles back. Their car had broken down, and with the nearest town over 20 miles away, they were in a tough spot. The truckers wanted to help but couldn't leave their rigs unattended. Without hesitation, Richardson stepped forward. "I can check on them," he offered, his uniform drawing respectful nods from the drivers. They gave him precise directions to the stranded family's location, and within minutes, he was back on his bike. He found the family, a couple with 2 young children, exactly where the truckers had described. Their minivan sat on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly. The father was trying to keep the children entertained while the mother paced nervously, phone in hand searching for signal. As Richardson pulled up, he saw relief flood their faces. The father introduced himself as a high school teacher taking his family to visit relatives. Their van had started making strange noises before dying completely. Richardson's years of military vehicle maintenance training kicked in as he examined the engine. "Looks like your alternator," he diagnosed, wiping his hands on a bandana. "I can't fix it here, but I know someone who might be able to help." He pulled out his phone and called the truck stop, where the staff connected him with a local mechanic they trusted. While they waited for help to arrive, Richardson shared some of his water and the sandwiches the motel owner's wife had packed that morning. The children, initially shy, became fascinated by his stories of cross-country motorcycle adventures. Their mother expressed gratitude not just for the assistance, but for helping keep the kids' spirits up during a stressful situation. The mechanic arrived sooner than expected, a friendly woman in well-worn coveralls who introduced herself as the owner of the local garage. She'd brought a tow truck and, after a quick inspection, confirmed Richardson's diagnosis. "You've got a good eye," she commented, already working to secure the van for towing. The family piled into the tow truck's extended cab, but before they left, the father turned to Richardson. "You didn't have to stop," he said. "Most people just drove by. But you saw people in need and chose to help. That's what my kids will remember about today." As Richardson watched the tow truck disappear over the horizon, he thought about how simple acts of kindness could shape people's perceptions and experiences. His own journey had been transformed by the kindness of strangers, Betty at the diner, Sarge and his crew, the motel owners, and now he had the chance to pay it forward. Back at the truck stop, word of his helpful intervention had spread. The staff insisted on comping his meal, despite his polite protests. A group of veterans among the truck drivers invited him to join them for dinner, eager to share stories and offer advice about the roads ahead. One of the drivers, a former Navy Seabee, spoke about how the highways had changed over his 30 years of driving. "Used to be more divided," he reflected. "But these days, I see more people helping each other, looking past differences. Maybe we're finally learning that we're all just travelers on the same road." As the evening progressed, Richardson found himself drawn into conversations with people from all walks of life. A grandmother heading cross-country to meet her first grandchild. A young couple starting a new life in California. Each story added another thread to the tapestry of American life he'd been witnessing on his journey. The truck stop's restaurant manager, noticing Richardson's interest in people's stories, shared how her place had become a sort of unofficial community center. "Everybody needs a place where they can feel welcome," she explained. "Doesn't matter what you look like or where you're from, here, you're just another traveler needing a good meal and maybe a friendly word." As night fell, more travelers arrived, seeking refuge from the darkening roads. Richardson observed how the staff treated everyone with equal respect, from the weather-beaten hitchhiker buying a simple cup of coffee to the business executive in an expensive suit grabbing dinner between flights. Before heading to his bike, Richardson called the mechanic's shop to check on the stranded family. They were safe, the van was being repaired, and the local community had rallied to help them find accommodation for the night. The news reinforced his growing belief that beneath the surface tensions that often dominated headlines, there was a deeper current of compassion in America. Under the vast starlit sky, Richardson reflected on how his journey had become about more than just getting from point A to point B. Each encounter, each small act of kindness or moment of understanding, was a reminder of the connections that bound people together across all divides. As he prepared to mount his bike, a young trucker approached him. "Hey, if you're heading west, there's a storm system moving in. My CB's been crackling with warnings." He proceeded to share detailed information about alternate routes and safe stopping points, marking them on Richardson's map. This simple exchange, a stranger looking out for another stranger, seemed to embody everything Richardson had experienced since beginning his journey. As he rode into the night, the stars overhead and the distant glow of cities on the horizon, he carried with him a renewed faith in the fundamental goodness of people and the endless possibilities that arose when they chose to look past their differences and see each other simply as fellow travelers on life's highway. The storm clouds that had been threatening all evening finally caught up with Richardson as he approached a small mountain town. Heavy raindrops began to fall, and lightning illuminated the darkening sky. He spotted a well-maintained motel with a covered parking area, a welcome sight for any rider caught in the weather. The motel's office was warm and inviting, with a stone fireplace and comfortable chairs that spoke of mountain hospitality. The owner, a retired park ranger, took one look at Richardson's soaked uniform and immediately offered him a room at a discount. "Anyone serving our country deserves a dry bed and a warm welcome," he said, handing over the key. As Richardson moved his bike under cover, he noticed a familiar patch on a leather vest hanging in the office, the same type Sarge and his crew wore. The owner explained that his son was part of their network of veteran riders. "Small world, isn't it?" he smiled. "Those folks have done more good for this community than most people know." The rain intensified as night fell, drumming steadily on the motel's metal roof. Richardson was grateful for the shelter, but his thoughts turned to others who might be caught in the storm. His concern proved prophetic when headlights cut through the rain, revealing 3 motorcycles desperately seeking refuge. The riders turned out to be a family, parents and their teenage daughter, returning from a graduation celebration. They were soaked to the bone and shivering. Without hesitation, Richardson helped them unload their bikes while the motel owner scrambled to prepare a room. In the motel's small breakfast nook, which the owner had opened early to provide hot coffee for the stranded riders, the family shared their story. The father was a long-haul trucker who'd recently taught his wife and daughter to ride, fulfilling their shared dream of taking family trips on motorcycles. Today's graduation ride was supposed to be their first big adventure together. "Some adventure," the daughter laughed, wringing water from her hair. "But you know what? Even with the storm, it's been perfect. We're together, we're safe, and we've met kind people along the way." Her words carried wisdom beyond her years. As the evening progressed, more travelers sought shelter from the storm. The motel owner's wife arrived with pots of homemade chili and cornbread, turning the breakfast nook into an impromptu storm shelter. Soon, the small space was filled with the warmth of conversation and shared meals. A truck driver, who'd pulled over because the rain made driving too dangerous, shared stories about the changes he'd seen across America during his 30 years on the road. A retired teacher spoke about her cross-country bicycle trip and the kindness of strangers she'd encountered. Each story added another layer to Richardson's understanding of the country he'd sworn to protect. The teenage daughter, recovering from her earlier chill, pulled out her phone to show pictures from their graduation celebration. Richardson noticed she'd captured some candid shots of people helping each other during the storm, strangers holding umbrellas for one another, riders working together to secure motorcycles against the wind. "That's what I want to do," she explained, showing him more photos. "Document the real America, not the angry voices we hear on TV, but the everyday moments when people come together." Her parents beamed with pride as she shared her dreams of becoming a photojournalist. Later in the evening, the motel owner received a call about a group of stranded hikers nearby. Richardson immediately volunteered to join the owner and several other guests in organizing supplies, warm clothes, hot drinks, and food. The collective response showed no hesitation, no questioning of who deserved help, just people coming together to support others in need. While they waited for news about the hikers, Richardson found himself in conversation with an elderly couple who'd been traveling cross-country in their RV. They shared stories about their own military service decades ago and how the country had changed since then. "You know what hasn't changed?" the elderly woman asked, her eyes twinkling. "The heart of America. Oh, we've got our troubles, no doubt about that. But when the chips are down, when someone needs help, that's when you see who we really are." As if to prove her point, word came that the hikers had been found and were being brought to the motel. The entire group mobilized, some preparing hot drinks, others gathering dry clothes, everyone ready to help however they could. The storm raged outside, but within the motel's walls, something beautiful was happening. People from different backgrounds, who might never have met under normal circumstances, were sharing stories, offering support, and finding common ground. Richardson observed how the teenage photographer captured these moments, not the dramatic rescues or grand gestures, but the small kindnesses, a trucker sharing his lunch with a stranded family, the motel owner's wife making sure everyone had enough to eat, travelers helping each other with wet gear and offering words of encouragement. When the hikers finally arrived, cold but safe, they were welcomed into this impromptu community without question. The motel owner refused payment for their rooms, saying only, "Tonight, we're all family here." As midnight approached, the storm began to ease. Richardson stood under the motel's covered walkway, watching the lightning illuminate the mountains in the distance. The teenage photographer joined him, quietly taking pictures of the clearing sky. "You know what I learned today?" she said, reviewing her shots. "Sometimes it takes a storm to bring people together, to remind us of our shared humanity." She showed him a particular photo, a group of strangers huddled around the fireplace, sharing food and laughter despite the weather raging outside. Richardson nodded, understanding that he was witnessing something profound in this small mountain motel. The storm had forced people to stop, to see each other, to reach out and help. In doing so, it had revealed the true character of America, not the divided nation often portrayed in the media, but a community of people capable of extraordinary kindness when given the chance to show it. The mountain morning dawned crisp and clear, the storm's passage leaving behind a freshly washed world. Richardson stepped out of his room to find the motel's parking lot alive with activity. The stranded travelers from the previous night were preparing to resume their journeys, but there was something different about their interactions, a warmth and familiarity that hadn't existed before the storm. The teenage photographer was already up, capturing the golden morning light as it painted the mountains. She'd been documenting the aftermath of the storm, puddles reflecting the sunrise, steam rising from warm motorcycle engines, people helping each other load their gear. Her father watched proudly as she worked, telling Richardson how she'd already received offers from local newspapers to publish her storm shelter photos. In the breakfast nook, the motel owner's wife had outdone herself. The table groaned under the weight of homemade biscuits, scrambled eggs, and fresh coffee. The hikers who'd been rescued the night before sat with their rescuers, all traces of strangerhood erased by their shared experience. "You know," one of the hikers said, passing Richardson the coffee pot, "we were pretty scared up there in the storm. But finding this place, experiencing such kindness from strangers, it changed something in us. Made us want to be better, to help others the way we were helped." The truck driver who'd taken shelter was on his phone, rearranging his schedule to help the family with the motorcycles check their bikes before hitting the road. His knowledge of mechanics proved invaluable as he taught them basic maintenance tips, ensuring they'd be safer on the rest of their journey. Richardson watched as the elderly couple from the RV shared their road maps with other travelers, marking safe routes and pointing out scenic stops. They'd traveled these roads for decades and were eager to pass on their knowledge. Their conversations went beyond mere directions, touching on the changes they'd witnessed in small-town America over the years. The motel owner joined Richardson on the covered walkway, both men watching the informal community that had formed in their parking lot. "In all my years running this place," the owner reflected, "I've learned that sometimes the worst weather brings out the best in people. Storms have a way of stripping away our pretenses, showing us who we really are." As if to prove his point, a group of local residents began arriving, having heard about the stranded travelers. They brought additional food, offers of assistance, and warm welcomes to their town. The teenage photographer captured these moments too, the simple acts of kindness that often go unnoticed but make up the true fabric of community. A local mechanic arrived to check on the motorcycles, refusing payment for his services. "My dad was a rider," he explained as he worked. "Taught me that the biker community looks after its own, and in weather like last night, we're all part of that community." Richardson helped the mechanic, their shared knowledge of engines creating an easy camaraderie. As they worked, the mechanic shared stories about the town's history, its struggles and triumphs, and how the community had learned to come together during difficult times. The hikers, preparing to leave, gathered everyone for a group photo. The teenage photographer set up the shot, carefully arranging people against the backdrop of mountains and morning sky. In that moment, looking at the diverse group of people who'd weathered the storm together, Richardson saw a reflection of America at its best, people from all walks of life, standing together, connected by shared experience and mutual support. As the morning progressed, people began departing one by one. Each farewell felt like saying goodbye to old friends rather than strangers they'd met just hours before. Contact information was exchanged, promises to stay in touch were made, and genuine connections were formed. The family with the motorcycles was among the last to leave. The daughter showed Richardson her final photos from their stay, including one that particularly moved him, a shot of people from different backgrounds sharing stories around the breakfast table, their faces lit with genuine warmth and understanding. "This is the America I want to show the world," she said, her voice full of conviction. "Not the divided one we see on the news, but the real one, where people still help each other, where strangers become friends, where kindness is more powerful than fear." Before mounting his own bike, Richardson helped the motel owner and his wife clean up from breakfast. They worked in comfortable silence, each processing the events of the past 24 hours. The owner's wife finally spoke, voicing what many were thinking: sometimes it takes a storm to remind us of our common humanity. As Richardson prepared to leave, the motel owner pressed a small package into his hands, sandwiches for the road and a copy of the group photo they'd taken earlier. "To remind you that there's always shelter from the storm," he said with a knowing smile. Mounting his bike, Richardson took one last look at the motel that had become more than just a shelter from bad weather. It had become a testament to the enduring spirit of community and kindness that still existed across America, often hidden but never extinguished. The morning sun was warm on his back as he rode away, the mountains rising majestically before him. In his mirrors, he could see the teenage photographer capturing one last shot of his departure. He smiled, knowing that somewhere in her growing collection of images, she was documenting not just moments, but the very heart of what made America strong, not its divisions, but its capacity for unity, not its fears, but its courage, not its differences, but its fundamental, unshakable humanity. The open road beckoned, and with it, the promise of more stories, more connections, and more reminders that beneath the surface of our national tensions lay a deeper truth, the power of simple kindness to transform strangers into friends, and moments of crisis into opportunities for genuine human connection. The highway stretched endlessly before Richardson as he entered the vast expanse of the Western Plains. The morning's coolness had given way to the sun's warmth, and scattered clouds cast moving shadows across the golden landscape. His thoughts drifted to the connections he'd made over the past few days, each encounter adding another layer to his understanding of the country he served. His journey was interrupted by the sight of a small convoy of military vehicles pulled over on the shoulder. As he slowed his bike, he recognized them as National Guard trucks, likely returning from a training exercise. The soldiers were helping change a flat tire on a civilian's car while providing water to the stranded family. Richardson pulled over, offering his assistance. The guard unit sergeant greeted him with respect, explaining they'd found the family struggling with the spare tire in the intense heat. The father had recently undergone surgery and couldn't manage the physical work himself. As they worked together, Richardson noticed how the guard members interacted with the family, not just helping with the tire, but entertaining the children with stories and ensuring everyone stayed hydrated. One soldier was sharing his own experiences of road trips with his family, creating a connection that went beyond mere assistance. The family's teenage son watched the soldiers with obvious admiration. His mother explained that he'd been considering military service but had been hesitant due to stories he'd heard about discrimination. Watching Richardson work alongside the guard members, seeing the natural camaraderie and respect between them, seemed to affect the young man deeply. "This is what service really looks like," Richardson told him during a water break. "It's not about where you're from or what you look like. It's about standing together, helping others, being part of something bigger than yourself." The boy's eyes lit up with understanding, and his mother mouthed a silent thank you to Richardson. Once the tire was changed, the family insisted on taking a photo with their helpers. The guard sergeant used the moment to invite the teenager to visit their local armory, offering to show him more about military life and the opportunities it provided. The boy's excitement was palpable as they exchanged contact information. As Richardson prepared to continue his journey, the guard sergeant pulled him aside. "What happened back there," he said, gesturing to the departing family, "that's the kind of moment that changes perspectives. That young man saw something today he'll never forget." The afternoon sun was high as Richardson rode on, the encounter with the guard unit and the family still fresh in his mind. He stopped at a small roadside diner for lunch, where he found himself sharing a counter with a group of long-haul truckers. They were discussing a radio report about increasing tensions in various parts of the country. "You know what the news doesn't show," one trucker commented, noticing Richardson's uniform. "The everyday stuff. The good stuff. Like what I saw yesterday, bunch of bikers helping a stranded family, people from all walks of life coming together when it matters." The diner's owner, overhearing their conversation, joined in. She'd been running the place for 30 years and had seen the country go through many changes. "But some things stay the same," she insisted. "People still help each other. They still come together when times are tough. Maybe we just need to pay more attention to those moments." As if to prove her point, the diner's door opened to reveal a group of migrant workers, tired from a long day in the fields. Before they could order, several truckers had already paid for their meals. The workers, touched by the gesture, shared fresh fruit from the orchards where they worked. The simple exchange of kindness transcended any language barriers. Richardson watched as the diner became a space of genuine human connection. The truckers shared road stories with the workers, using a mix of broken Spanish and gestures. The owner's teenage son, who spoke both languages, helped translate, bridging gaps and facilitating understanding. A weather alert on the diner's radio warned of high winds ahead. The truckers immediately began sharing information about safe routes and shelter points, making sure everyone, especially those unfamiliar with the area, knew where to find help if needed. Before leaving, Richardson noticed the diner's wall of photos, decades of travelers, locals, and regulars captured in moments of celebration, compassion, and community. The owner explained that each picture told a story of connection, of people coming together despite their differences. "This is the real America," she said, pointing to a recent photo of various community members working together after a local flood. Not the shouting on TV, not the anger on social media. This, people helping people, sharing what they have, seeing each other as human beings first. As the afternoon wore on, Richardson mounted his bike again, carrying with him the warmth of these encounters. The western sky stretched endlessly before him, a reminder of the vastness of the country and the countless stories of unity and kindness that unfolded each day across its expanse. A group of riders approached from the opposite direction, and Richardson recognized their patches. They were part of a multicultural motorcycle club known for their community service. They exchanged waves as they passed, a simple gesture that spoke of shared respect and understanding. At his next fuel stop, Richardson found himself helping a young couple with their map. They were new to the area, making their first cross-country trip. As he pointed out scenic routes and safe stopping points, he shared stories from his own journey: the storm shelter, the guard unit, the diner, each tale illustrating the threads of compassion that tied communities together. The couple listened intently, and the young woman commented, "It's funny, we were nervous about making this trip, hearing all the stories about division in the country. But everywhere we've stopped, we've found kindness instead." As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Richardson reflected on how his journey had become about more than just reaching his destination. It had become a testament to the enduring spirit of unity that persisted despite the headlines, a reminder that across America, people still reached out to help others, still chose understanding over division, still saw the humanity in each other. The highway stretched ahead, carrying him toward new encounters and experiences, each mile reinforcing his faith in the fundamental goodness of people and the power of simple acts of kindness to bridge any divide. The final leg of Richardson's journey began as the sun peaked over the eastern horizon. His destination was just a few hours away, but these last miles held their own profound lessons about the heart of America. The morning air carried the crisp scent of pine as he navigated the winding mountain roads of Colorado. At a scenic overlook, he encountered a group of veterans setting up for a mental health awareness event. They were creating a space where service members could share their experiences and find support. Without hesitation, Richardson pulled over to help them set up their canopies and information booths. One of the organizers, a retired counselor, shared how these informal gatherings often accomplished more than formal therapy sessions. "Out here, under the open sky, people feel free to open up," she explained. They realize they're not alone in their struggles. As more veterans arrived, Richardson noticed how the atmosphere shifted from initial reserve to genuine camaraderie. A young veteran, recently returned from overseas, spoke about his challenges readjusting to civilian life. Others shared their own experiences, offering not just sympathy, but practical advice and understanding. The event attracted passing travelers as well. A family on vacation stopped to learn more, their children wide-eyed as they listened to stories of service and sacrifice. The father, a teacher, took notes for a lesson plan about community service and veteran support. "This is what healing looks like," the counselor told Richardson quietly. "Not just for the veterans, but for the whole community. When people understand each other's journeys, it breaks down walls we didn't even know existed." By mid-morning, the gathering had evolved into an impromptu community event. Local food trucks arrived, offering free meals to veterans. Civilians mingled with service members, sharing stories and finding common ground. The mountain backdrop provided a majestic setting for these moments of connection. A photographer from a local newspaper captured the scene, not just the formal moments but the quiet conversations, the supportive hands on shoulders, the shared laughter. "These are the stories that need telling," she said, showing Richardson some of her shots. "The moments when we come together, when we remember our shared humanity." As Richardson prepared to continue his journey, the young veteran from earlier approached him. "Your uniform," he said, gesturing to Richardson's dress blues, "seeing you stop to help, being part of this, it reminded me why I served. It's not just about defending a country, it's about being part of something bigger, something that brings people together." The final stretch of highway offered sweeping views of the Rockies. Richardson found himself riding alongside a group of civilian riders who'd also attended the veterans event. They shared the road in comfortable formation, each rider watching out for the others, demonstrating the unspoken brotherhood of the road. At a final rest stop, Richardson encountered a familiar face, the bearded biker, Ray, from the beginning of his journey. He was with a completely different group now, wearing a vest that identified him as part of a veteran support organization. "Life's funny," Ray said, extending his hand. "That night at the motel changed everything for me. Made me realize I'd been looking at the world all wrong. Now we ride to help others, to show them there's a better way." They shared coffee and updates. Ray's group had been working with Sarge's organization, helping veterans and building bridges in communities across the country. The transformation in Ray's demeanor was remarkable, the anger replaced by purpose, the prejudice by understanding. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, more riders gathered around, drawn by the sight of Richardson's uniform and Ray's veteran support vest. Each had their own story of transformation, moments when they'd chosen understanding over hatred, unity over division. A young woman on a sport bike shared how she'd faced skepticism in the riding community until a group of veteran riders had stood up for her, teaching her skills and welcoming her into their family. "Now I do the same for others," she said proudly. "It's about passing on the kindness." The final miles to his new post felt different somehow. Richardson reflected on his journey, the diner incident that could have ended badly but instead sparked change, the storm that brought strangers together, the countless small moments of kindness and understanding he'd witnessed along the way. As he approached the base gates, he passed a group of protesters. But instead of angry signs, they held messages of support for military families. A closer look revealed some familiar faces from the veteran support groups he'd met along his journey, continuing their work of building bridges and fostering understanding. The base itself was preparing for a community open house, breaking down the invisible barriers between military and civilian life. Richardson watched as families explored displays, asked questions, and connected with service members. The same spirit of unity he'd encountered on his journey was alive here too. His new commanding officer greeted him with news that the base was expanding its community outreach programs. "We've learned that the strongest defense isn't just about weapons and walls," she explained. "It's about building connections, understanding each other, standing together." As Richardson finally parked his bike in its new home, he thought about the teenage photographer from the storm shelter, capturing moments of human connection. He thought about Ray's transformation, about the veterans supporting each other at the mountain gathering, about all the small acts of kindness he'd witnessed along America's highways. His phone buzzed with messages. Photos from the motel owner, updates from Sarge, a picture of Ray's group at their latest veteran support event. Each message a reminder that the connections forged on his journey weren't ending, they were part of a larger tapestry of understanding and unity being woven across the nation. The sun set behind the mountains as Richardson unpacked his bike. His uniform, worn proudly through thousands of miles, had become more than just a symbol of military service. It had become a reminder of America's capacity for change, for understanding, for coming together despite differences. His journey had shown him that beneath the surface of national headlines and social media debates, the true heart of America still beat strong, in truck stops and diners, on highways and back roads, in small towns and city streets. It lived in the countless moments of kindness between strangers, in the courage to change, in the willingness to see past differences and recognize our shared humanity. As night fell over his new home, Richardson knew that while his cross-country ride had ended, the real journey, the ongoing work of building bridges and fostering understanding, was just beginning.